Kia ora and talofa class. Welcome to EDAC 224 and PAS 102. This is the first lecture post-trimester break, and as we are in lockdown on level 4, we will have to watch and listen to my voice on this PowerPoint. And this lecture is called From Shapeshifters to Edgewalkers. The lecture is designed to help you with your second assignment for EDAC 224, which is a model, and also for PAS 102, your last assignment, which is a model. Okay, let's go forward. So when we're thinking about young people in Aotearoa, New Zealand, we think about young people who are navigating their journeys in education and through different elements of society. And for our second assignment, we're looking at education, educational challenges. We're looking at young Pasifika leaders who are overcoming and making changes in education. So education doesn't have to just be about schooling. It could be about community, it could be about church, it could be about the sports arena, it could be about society generally. So we're very interested in how you might perceive that type of representation of leadership. And when we define leadership, we're talking about it in the broadest sense as young people of influence, generally of positive influence. And so, as we know through our own identities as Pasifika peoples, we are always in the mode of changing and evolving. And I like to use this word shapeshifters or shape-shifting. And we change our ways of belonging and identifying with specific contexts through shape-shifting. So shape-shifting is a tradition that exists in most native cultures. And when you see the world through the experience of something else or somebody else, it deepens your understanding profoundly. So it does require a level of empathy, a level of understanding to be able to see the world from different angles and different lenses and different experiences without judgment. A person can take the shape of another being, most often an animal, and this has been traced back thousands and thousands of years, permeating various cultures and religions in shape-shifting. Here's a classic example of a shape-shifting image. And here we see the tiger merged into the face of a woman. And so as this element or the shapeshifter is existing, it shows a portrayal of someone who is able to see the world and move through the world in different ways, as an animal, as a human being, as someone who may be quite soft, or who is someone quite aggressive. This is another common image that we've seen in the story of Moana, the Disney movie, where this is Maui, who has shapeshifted into what we would call here an eagle, so that he is able to fly. He is able to see the volcanoes. He's able to navigate the seas, see the world, or see the planet in an angle that is different from how we might see the world as through the human eye. Another image of Maui in full flight as he is taking off in his animal being. I just had to take a quick pause there because my little dog is barking, and he just annoys me when he does that when I'm trying to do some work. Okay, so let's go back to shape-shifting. And when imposed forms are applied to a being or an animal, these forms are punitive in nature. So the power to externally transform can symbolize an internal savagery. Again, this is really about how we can transform and modify our identities, see things from different angles, escape and liberate ourselves through shape-shifting. And we see this in examples of Pacific identities and Indigenous identities, and even identities for women or LGBTQIA as well. So another notion of identity, or working through some of our Pacific identities and spaces, is the notion of edgewalkers or edgewalking. Dr. Emery Tupuola talks a lot about edgewalking. So this is someone who walks between the worlds that they have around them. They build bridges and they work at the boundaries. They are individuals who don't fit squarely into just one box. And edge walking also comes with risks and challenges. And edge walkers are usually unconventional people who often clash with more traditional rule-bound individuals. Edge walkers defy formal boundaries, transcending boundaries, and edge walkers can develop creativity. So this notion of edge walking was developed by Dr. Emery Tupuola when she was doing some research with her Samoan young woman who were looking at their own notions of identity as they were feeling a bit down about themselves and their identities. They were saying that it was quite challenging working with notions of religion, of church, while they were trying to be Western woman as well, a young Samoan woman who were having relationships with other people, whether they were males or females, or just relationships at school. But the role of an edge walker can be a lonely one, and they often seek out other edge walkers to make connections. And I just interrupt this slide with some imageries of edge walkers, and so that's my friend Matthew in the blue, with Joseva, who is also a young youth leader at the local Fijian community. And here we are basically shape-shifting the notion of a kava ceremony. We are still greeting people, but in a more modern sense, but that also encompasses still traditional Fijian values and principles, but in a way that is, I suppose, sped up to help a discussion flow between people, to acknowledge people, but also to anticipate that we aren't in a village context, but we're in a context in Wellington. An edge walker is resilient to cultural shifts and able to maintain continuity wherever he or she goes, walking the edge between cultures in the same persona. So you are being the same person, but you're walking edges, walking a tightrope between multiple worlds. So you may be a son at home, you may be a brother at home, but when you leave your home, you may become the young man or the young teenager in a classroom who is navigating his identity. So who are we as young Pasifika peoples or young people in this country? Are you an edge walker or shapeshifter? Do you see yourself like that? Are there edge walkers, shapeshifters around you? And most often in leadership or community development, we find that edge walkers or shapeshifters are strong in their identities. They see multiple identities. They lead others as well. And they learn from the struggles in their lives. So these struggles are things that they could be honest with, whether it's like alcohol, relationship issues, depression, struggle with finances, struggle with identities, struggles with cultures. And these people learn from their struggles, and then they go on to help others from their own stories. We weave within and between cultures. This is a great line. And in a way, great educational leaders, great young people who are leaders are able to weave within and between cultures. So this slide is something that we discussed earlier in the course, and it's just a reflection about some of our traditional Pacific societies and identities, and it's just a reminder for you to have a look at has been and is that was foundational for our Pacific peoples and our identities, but we won't spend too much on this slide. And again, as we already discussed earlier in the course, this is just a reminder about migration and how it's impacted on identity. So in a nutshell, we could say that as Pasifika peoples, we have migrated to Aotearoa, New Zealand for opportunities such as employment, such as education, and we've had labels slapped on us. We've been categorized as lazy, as islanders. We've had racism. We continue to have racism. We've had ideals slapped on us that aren't ours, and so this has impacted on our traditional identity. And umbrella terms at the start of migration, such as the term Pacific Islanders, was used as a grouping term. It didn't recognize the diversity of the islands. Cultures and identities became redefined with migration, and now we have a growing diversity amongst Pacific people or Pacific peoples here in this country. We are evolving, we are young as a population, we speak a lot of English, we read and write in English. We will have takeaways for dinner. We would hang out at malls, at playgrounds, rather than on the plantation or in a village context. So it's predicted that with some of the sociologists such as Paul Spoonley, Clooney McPherson, that our traditional island identities may become lost by the fourth generation, or perhaps even earlier for some of our different Pacific ethnic groups. So the static traditional culture of our grandparents or our great-grandparents is lost, or we're losing it. And that notions of formal education spaces and identities supersedes our island values and beliefs. And as we know, some of us have never been back to the Pacific Islands. And now with COVID-19 around, that is less likely to happen for us to have our island cultures to access easily. So as we are increasingly being born in New Zealand, Pacific peoples may take on values and beliefs of non-Pacific peoples. And more further, we may marry out of our own ethnic group. We may lose our mother tongue and thus opt out of island rituals. We've also become upwardly mobile at the expense of our island cultures. And we are dispersed geographically across the world. So what does this mean for our identities? What does this mean for young Pacific peoples who are leaders, are navigating this world that is different, that is COVID-19, that is climate change, that is technologically different, that involves Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and so forth? What do we need from our young Pacific peoples? What voices are we listening to? Whose voices are prioritized? Are we able to hear Pacific voices that are youthful? And as we're thinking about the second assignment, think about it from the angle of a strengths-based approach. So strength as in what works for people. What are the good things that are happening around us? What are the good stories? How do some of us as Pasifika peoples in Irak 224 or PAS 102, how do we navigate systems as shapeshifters, as edgewalkers, as leaders? What do we need to do? Who do we talk to? Who do we confide in? Who mentors us? How do we learn from our stories? Some of us have struggled in school systems, yet we made it to university. What were the enabling factors in that? So when you're thinking about the second assignment, whether you want to create it as a carving, a weaving, a collage, a website, something technologically funky, a documentary, a film. There are many options for you to present your model of a young Pasifika educational leader, or an activist as well. And how would you represent that? Have some fun with it, have some creativity with it. And as we're saying, because of the COVID levels, we would require you, when you do your write-up of your model, we're using the very general word model, that you take photographs of it so that we can see it in your written piece. So think about, what are the influences on your your young Pasifika leader? How would you represent edgewalking, resiliency, shapeshifting? How do we respond to or navigate the proposed challenges of evolving identities for young Pacific peoples in our classrooms and our schools? And we know that one size doesn't fit all. We know we're not all the same, even though we come from groups of Tahitians or Samoans or Tokelauans or Niueans. We have our intricate differences, and this is all part of leadership. Is that, how do we include people rather than exclude people? How do we make sure that those who don't speak their language are included? How do we make sure that LGBTQIA have a voice? How do we make sure that those who are on the periphery, who look different, who don't have a voice, are included in our spaces, and so that they feel belong, so they feel a sense of belonging. Sorry, my English is really bad when I'm trying to record myself. So yeah, so I think I'll leave this PowerPoint here and let you enjoy and think about identity for young Pacific peoples, but more particularly for those who are leaders who choose to be of influence. And remember, anybody can influence anybody else. It's whether you choose that, your attitude, whether you choose to say hi to somebody, whether you choose to check on your neighbor in COVID times, whether you choose to turn up to tutorial or lecture. That is leadership. Whether you choose to honour the legacy of your parents, of your grandparents who have migrated to Aotearoa, New Zealand, for better life, for the land of milk and honey. So enjoy your time, have some fun with the assignment, be creative, don't set yourself any limits. Talk to Ase or myself if you are stuck on ideas. But yeah, let's challenge the system with a different form of knowledge and way of representing that knowledge. Take care. Tō whā soifua.